So welcome to this week's episode of the Drivetime Podcast. This was a special episode that we recorded on the road in Canada recently. I spent some time with our colleagues and customers in Toronto and managed to visit a couple of events. This episode was recorded with a good friend of mine, Niel Hiscox, who is the president of Universus Media and also MCs the CADA events, which are Canadian Automotive Dealer Association. So he's incredibly well connected and also completely current with what's happening in Toronto and also across the Canadian automotive market. So enjoy this episode. It was really good fun to spend time with Niel. You'll enjoy it. So, hey, welcome back. This is Drivetime Podcast on the road. I'm here with Niel Hiscox from Universus Media, my good friend from Canada. So I always make time to spend time with Niel whenever I'm here. And Niel's role, as you will, if you don't already know Niel, he's like the centre of the automotive universe in Canada. Self-confessed. So, but also he works very closely with all of the dealers, the Canadian Automotive Dealer Association, a number of OEMs, and they also run media products and do creative and a whole host of other good things. So we're going to just have a little chat about how life is in Canada at the moment. It's now June 2025. So the last time we spoke and recorded this, and we'll have some of our conversation. We'll go back to some of that, but that was pre-election and now we're very post-election. Yes. So things are very different now and the reality changes on a daily basis. So
well, and we're not just post-election, we're post two elections.
Yes, true.
And as the world knows, and certainly got a lot of coverage in the UK, the first election really completely shifted the results of the second election.
Yeah.
And so while we don't want to be all about politics, the reality is we are living, the automotive industry is living in an environment right now in which there's a lot of political thumbs on the scales, moving things in all kinds of directions.
So that was a really interesting point, that the result of that election completely, I think it instigated another election. It was probably on the cards, but it happened maybe quicker than people thought.
It was on the cards, but we were really looking at a scenario where the Liberal Party in Canada, who had been in power for a decade, were not only were they not expected to win, they were expected to get wiped out.
Yeah.
In fact, I saw polling in January that suggested they were going to be hit so badly they wouldn't even be the official opposition.
Oh, wow. Bad.
Which is so, and of course, what ended up happening is they won the election.
Yeah.
And we now have a prime minister in Canada who is really has the mandate to chart a Canadian path amid the U.S. tariff activity, the need to deepen our relationships internationally, and certainly with his history in the UK and Europe, I think he should have a great start and a foundation to build from.
Yeah.
But it's going to have lots of automotive overtones.
So I arrived. The reason I came up for this particular visit, there was a Lenders Association meeting summit on Monday, and that was lenders across the board. So it wasn't just automotive finance, but it was everything, how people think about money, how they think about wealth. Obviously, Mark Carney's background was he was formerly the head of the Bank of England, and there was some talk about, I was just listening to some chaps talking about, oh, well, we think he's really just still corporate. He just said what people wanted to hear. And I actually think there's probably going to be a bit of a give him a chance. I think he knows how to stimulate an economy and how to steady the ship. So that's what he did in the UK. He understood how interest rates would impact, affordability and how people come into their budgets and mortgages and everything else. And vehicle purchase is the second largest purchase. And it felt like there was quite a lot of innovation coming out of that lender space and just technology driving the ability to just manage money differently and move, like open banking is behind here, is now accelerated. Yeah. So I think some of those things are going to be quite interesting. And that all leads to affordability and also people coming back to work more traffic on the roads. There's a lot going on. So I think there's, but just thinking about the people that you speak to on a daily basis, I know that you're in the middle of doing a big piece of research as well with the retailers to understand what's going on for them in terms of tech and how transformation is happening. So now that the elections have kind of happened and chaos is still ensuing, how do the retailers manage that on a daily basis with their businesses? Because that must be quite tough for them.
Well, it is. We go and you different industry events, or I'm speaking at different industry events, and you want to give an update, and it's almost a well, what time is it? Because the news may have changed since the tariff pendulum. It's like being on a sailboat when the boat tacks and the boom comes swinging across. You want to make sure you duck. I think a lot of what I'm hearing, at least for the first part of the year, is it's been an absolutely fantastic 2025 so far. Yeah. Now, the reason for that is given is simply consumers afraid of the impact of tariffs on pricing have been pulling their sales forward, but dramatically so. So when I talk to dealers certainly, and you look at a lot of the OEM results too, sales are really, really strong. And if anything, what people are starting to say is where we have inventory challenges because we can't get the vehicles we want because the sales have been so strong. The conversation changes when you then say, okay, and looking ahead to the second half of the year, what do you think? And I had to use a very Canadian expression. I think they're expecting it to be tougher sledding in the second half. If what we're doing is pulling sales forward, because at the end of the day, this isn't going to be creating net new sales. It's really about timing.
Yeah, timing as well. And we experienced obviously lack of stock in the UK because this is going back to the COVID situation when microchips are all diverted into laptops and home computing. So people work from home. So that led to a fairly unusual shift in the patterns of sale. Yep. But actually, two of the OEMs I've spent time with this week have had 4 record months, just to your point. But if people are pulling it forward, it means then that they're having, what I suppose you need to figure out is how do you end up at the end of the year? What's your position? You might have 84% of your target or 64% of your target achieved already versus what you might have expected, 47, 57. So by the end of the year, you should hopefully then level things out. If the supply and demand has leveled itself out, I don't know whether you think we're going to be next year having really big targets or things will calm down to a normal level. Don't know.
It's really hard to know. Certainly, if you look at things like interest rates, so everyone is wondering, all right, well, if the Canadian economy is suffering the impact and starting to feel the impact of the tariffs from the States, does that mean we're going to see a softening of interest rates? We haven't yet. And at the same time, one of the things that is a holdover from the last few years is there's a lot of Canadians in 2025 and 2026 that are renewing mortgages and are going to be renewing a mortgage. In many cases, it'll probably be a 5-year term they're renewing and are going to be going from a mortgage interest rate that probably had a 2 or may even have had a 1 as the first number of that interest rate to something that is going to have a 4 or may well have a 5. And that's a dramatic change from a monthly cash flow standpoint. And so what impact does that then have? One of the decisions that's relatively easy for a consumer to do in that scenario is to say, hey, maybe I'm going to kick a vehicle purchase down the road.
Yeah.
But then the corollary to that is the age of the fleet in operation is such that a lot of those cars, there's a lot of cars that are due to be changed. So
leasing is a big thing here, isn't it? I think more so, I was chatting to one of the people at the Lenders Association, and we call it PCP. Here you call it balloon payment. And actually, one of the challenges with the balloon payment method was it was very poorly explained. So consumers didn't really know what they were getting into. And at the end of the balloon payment, they were like, whoa, hey, what? I thought I would own it by now. And you go, no, you've either got to pay another $30,000 or hand the car back. So that caused probably a pain point where there didn't need to be one if we just explained the process properly. But actually now, affordability and how you manage your finances is a pain point. I'm dreading. I've got my mortgage renewal next year and I had a 1 and it probably will be a 4. I'm like, don't want to think about it. But it is going to happen. So but you either think about, well, I lengthen the term or I overpay it. But you're always balancing out, like, what do you need to factor into your monthly budgets? So just generally then, I know you wanted to talk about, I suppose, the different brands that are coming in and how we've seen a huge influx of new entrants coming into the UK and actually welcomed into the UK because other stock wasn't available. OEMs were trying to trade with the retailers in a different way with different contracts. So new entrants have come in to an existing wholesale footprint, a retail footprint, and retailers are like, great, actually, they're marketing them really well, they're investing a lot of money in marketing and positioning, and consumers are buying the product because they're leasing it as well. I think they're taking less risk by leasing than they would have done if they owned it. Is that something you're seeing evolving here? Or
it'll be interesting to see. I mean, in terms of new brands, and I think you mean fundamentally Chinese brands,
of course,
right?
yeah, like BYD and kind of
so
Jacqui.
we are still North America, not Mexico. The Chinese OEMs are very strong in Mexico and growing. Canada and the States, we remain the last little outpost where Chinese vehicles are not for sale. We still have 100% tariff on Chinese vehicles that Canada put in place to basically be in lockstep with the States when they put that in place. And that's going to be really interesting to see because, what so much of the political discussion has been around Canada now needing to not decouple from the States in any way, shape, or form. We want to continue to grow that relationship, but at the same time to diversify and deepen our connection to Asia and deepen our connection to Europe. So then as part of that, well, what's going to happen with that tariff? And it's interesting, I had the Chinese embassy in Ottawa reached out and they'd said, hey, we just want to talk automotive and cars. So we talked automotive and cars last week. The way they framed it, and I can certainly understand why, they said, from our standpoint, we put retaliatory agricultural tariffs on your soybean and potash and all the rest of it, which really hit Canadian Western farmers, purely as a retaliation for your unreasonable automotive tariffs. And the second those go away, all those agricultural tariffs go away. And what do we think is going to take to make that happen? But I think at a higher level, one thing is that the world is listening to the kind of rhetoric and the commentary that's coming from the new Canadian Prime Minister, certainly what's coming out of the States, and I think are starting to realize that they can think of Canada, and Canada wants to be thought of no longer as simply in lockstep with the States.
Yeah.
We had a Chinese OEM in our offices here. They've been in a couple of times talking to us about how we may be able to potentially support them in sort of research and stuff around a launch. And they were very candid. They said, we've always looked at North America and it's always been a US first strategy. We just assumed Canada would be sort of a gift with purchase. And they said, all of a sudden now in our executive halls, we're looking at Canada separately and realizing, no, these things actually need to be considered in isolation. So where does all that leave us? It's hard to say because for all the rhetoric and the intensity of some of that rhetoric, how much of that is really just softening the ground for what will be a renewed USMCA, which may mean the world doesn't look that different here than it did before. But my guess is it's not going to be that simple. It's going to be more complicated. And particularly with, the steel tariffs, all this stuff, it's going to be really interesting to see. And I don't think there's any question that as far as the Chinese OEMs go in Canada, it's not an if, it's a when.
Yeah, no, I think from the conversations that I've had this week, and it's been a mixed week of the Lenders Association, some OEMs, the Empowering Auto team, who are all working for OEMs as well. It feels, and also our own teams, there feels like we need to build our own infrastructure. We need to not rely on the United States as much, and we need to make sure that we have our independence so that they don't get to do that to us anymore, because that partnership has been really tainted.
Yep.
And actually, so even these we're not buying lettuce from there. I really miss that iceberg lettuce. I'm like, what? You're not eating the lettuce? But simply we were in a restaurant last night. There was no Californian wine on offer. They've taken it all off. They're not selling it. So there is there's a loyalty definitely to Canadians wanting to buy Canadian or not buying American products, because it feels like they're being punished for no reason. So I think it'll be interesting. But the willingness to want to build an infrastructure that is self-contained, and also having your own trade agreements that are also your own trade agreements feels like it's a very likely thing to happen.
Well, and one thing that is interesting, and there are probably some people who would get angry to frame it this way, but as much as Ford and General Motors and Stellantis have been here forever and have been manufacturing in Canada forever. At a time when, Canadians are really looking at what are Canadian brands, what are European brands, what are American brands. The reality is there is no Canadian car brand.
No.
And so Ford, Stellantis, GM are American brands operating here. So, I think the Canadian consumer is going to have a level of openness to new brands that's probably very different in south of the border, because for an American, those are domestic brands. For a Canadian, they're not. And I think that's going to play into how consumers respond.
I think you're right. So we obviously see in the UK, across Europe, we have a real kind of wealth of great car products, so we have Volkswagen, Audi, German brands, so very embedded into the way that we live and work with our vehicles. One thing I have noticed, obviously here, partly because of the snowy weather when you get it, vehicles are massive. They're huge, great big vehicles. And as things move ever closer towards EV or sustainability, there will be potentially a move towards, I don't know whether there will be, but it feels like there needs to be a move towards maybe smaller vehicles, more sustainable vehicles, because the planet's not getting any cleaner by carrying on.
So you're touching on the tip of a really interesting iceberg, which is safety regs and emission regs in Canada are aligned with those in the States.
Yeah.
But there's one of the byproducts of that is that for a manufacturer who is looking at selling a vehicle in North America, including domestic US manufacturers, you're going to build to American tastes. You're not going to build to Canadian tastes. And so there's lots of research and lots of examples over history where Canadians actually had an openness to smaller vehicles or vehicle configurations that didn't sell well in the States, but because of that reality, we didn't get them.
Right.
So the classic example that usually gets trotted out is hatchbacks. Canadian hatchbacks do quite well in Canada. They don't do well in the States.
Yeah.
As a result, there's a lot of hatchback product that simply we don't get. So one of the big pushes that is underway, the head of the CADA has been talking about this a lot in the media, and I think it's, as Canada looks to diversify its relationship, but this is really low-hanging fruit, is to say, look, let's not just recognize and the Canadian regulations in effect mirror the US ones, but let's also recognize the European safety and emission specs. Clearly, and I think Tim Royce was quoted as saying, a car that's safe to do 200 kilometers an hour on the Autobahn's probably safe in Canada.
Pretty sure it is.
So, this is
exactly.
pretty low-hanging fruit that if Canada would say, hey, we're going to do that. We're going to continue to recognize the existing Canadian-US regs, but we're going to recognize and harmonize with European regs. That would suddenly really change the dynamics around bringing cars into Canada that don't necessarily now need to find a market in the States.
Yeah. The thing that surprised me, I think, Neil, is that you have different rules and regs province by province. So it's not just one country going, hey, let's have these regulations. So Ottawa's going to be, or Ontario will be different to Montreal, to Quebec, and they have different, forgive my, I can't just trust all the provinces, but you have, even trading with yourselves is challenging. So actually, is there a time when within Canada there will be a simplification of the way that you trade with each other within your own
I think
border?
so. I mean, so again, Carney has been quoted as saying that simply by reducing interprovincial trade barriers, we could probably gain 3% of GDP, just like that.
I mean, simple, makes sense.
Yeah. Now, simple, obviously these interprovincial trade barriers exist because provinces are protecting their own areas of strength, and whether it's dairy farmers or whatever the case may be. But yes, I think that's going to be low-hanging fruit. And I think it's at the top of the list of priorities in terms of changes to make. One thing that's going to be really interesting to see, and in some way this is, analogous to when Trump came in, everyone said, look, he's not a politician. He's going to try to run the country like it's a company. I think a lot of people are wondering, as Carney tries to make a lot happen in a hurry, and he's very much on record as saying he wants a lot to happen in a hurry, is he going to run into some of the same, government is a slower moving beast. But I do think there's an appetite, and it starts with Canadians, individual consumers, and iceberg lettuce all the way up to say, hey, let's really put the pedal to the metal.
It definitely feels like that, and I think it's been interesting. You see it from across the pond, and then you come here and you actually see how people are behaving. Just by we'll vote with our feet. We're not going to buy that. We'll buy this.
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting. So what are the big things that you're working on this year? Obviously, you've got loads of projects. You meant you're speaking at loads of events, and you're working really close with the industry. What are the big sort of projects that you've got going on for 2025?
So we are we're working with CADA, and over a decade ago had put out a big strategic document that really was to say what do we think automotive retail looks like in Canada 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And that it's time to do an update of that. So we're working on that right now, which is really interesting, and it's fascinating to see what the sort of the arc of some of the predictions that were made 10, 12 years ago, which looked like they gained traction, which didn't. And of course, we're doing that same thing now. One thing we're doing that I'm really excited about, we are doing the first ever Canadian automotive retail technology study.
Yes.
So as we know, the tech stack in the dealer is really complicated.
Yeah.
And for good reasons. I mean, you got your CRM providers and DMS providers, website platform providers, all the rest. And as a standalone franchise, how you configure your business can be different than somebody else. At the same time as dealers, dealer groups, and OEMs all sort of try to move towards this omni-channel, Amazon-like customer experience, you need data to move easily. You need it to be recognized. You need to have a single record source of truth.
Yeah.
The vehicle itself becomes a node on that pathway, and it's very hard to do that if you've got 200 dealers across the country and every one of them has a different tech stack.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is to try to start to look at that and be the first of what is going to be an ongoing look at that. Is we're researching dealers, working with dealers to understand where do they feel good, where do they not feel so good, where do they believe they're going to be investing, where do they think it's going to be hard to invest. And it's going to be really fascinating to see what comes out of that, because it is a fresh study. It's never been done in Canada before. And then I think the goal is to then really do that with a very regular update cadence, because of course it's all changing so fast.
All the time, yeah.
I think one of the things I'm putting a lot of time into and trying to get my head around is the whole AI piece. And I mean, it's, on the one hand, you can do some absolutely unbelievable things. Like some of the stories that are coming out in terms of how people are gaining efficiency and how they are, using AI tools to actually engage with customers and are drawing customers into the dealership. Yeah. It's amazing. And yet at the same time, there's some really funny gaffes. So just for fun, I was in Saskatchewan last week speaking or moderating a panel at the SADA conference. And I had Paul Sullivan, who's the current chair of CADA, as one of the panelists. And to sort of illustrate the cautionary tale side of AI, I asked a very simple question. I went on to one, in this case it was Grok. I went on to Grok and I said, who is the current chair of the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association? Should be pretty simple. It came back and it said the current chair is David Starr. Now, we have no idea who David Starr is. I'm not even sure there is a David Starr. So that wasn't very good. It just made it up. Absolute hallucination. So then for fun, I went on to ChatGPT and I asked the exact same question. Simple question, who is the current chair of the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association? In this case, it got Paul Sullivan right, gave me a long 5 or 6 paragraphs on Paul, and at the top of the post was a picture of Mike Stollery, who was the CADA chair a few chairs ago. So, on the one hand, there's no question this AI is going to have such a transformative power in our business. But on the other hand, we have to be careful.
So interesting point. So we've been doing, part of the podcast series has been to help retailers understand where AI can start to slot into your business, because you're absolutely right. I think they're just getting their brains wrapped around digital transformation. And so this study will, I think, uncover some of that complexity within the retail space. And we have seen the same thing. We've mapped out dealers' system. We did like a dealer system landscape audit just to look at how many different systems they're logging into and out of. That really slows them down. Sledging is tough. It's like really sludging.
Very good, very Canadian of you.
Thank you. I learn fast. It's like tough sledding, too many systems. I'm going to coin that, living rent free in my head. So there is that. But I think if we can speed them up a little bit, that would be great. But the AI piece is so interesting. So we're working with partners that do it really well, because actually we've got a lot of engineering resource built into just managing our own systems and upgrading them and making sure that we're building new capabilities, and then bringing in AI around things like you can now do static images that create video in 30 seconds. You don't need studio lighting. You can just, you can use the tools to do the right things. Actually, interesting is when we speak to dealers is find out where they get stuck. Where do they kind of, like you say, where do they feel comfortable? Where do they not feel comfortable? How can we help ease their kind of path into using more tools, digital tools that meet the customer where they are? So AI chat is obviously, we're using some of those AI chat tools and we use them all the time. So I was on the Bloomin' BA website earlier on trying to figure out I seem to have 2 points accounts. I'm like, I just need to merge my points. So I just having a chat with the bot, and then I went to speak to a human. I just need to speak to a human that can help me to do it. And it finds the human agent, not the pretend agent. So I think there's a lot going to happen with agentic AI. You're absolutely right, though. The data accuracy is the thing you have to get right. So the work that needs to be done before you build anything to do with AI has to be get your data tidied up, and then you can start to build AI around it or use agentic AI. And that will be based on, if consumer is looking for a vehicle, can the agent find a vehicle that looks like that if that one's sold? And that's where having an up-to-date stock inventory will be really important. Or making sure that accounts are up to date, so the consumer, what they're saving or valuing or doing online is accurate when they walk into a showroom. But data accuracy will be the hygiene factor that will make or break, I think.
And it's going to be a challenge. I remember I was down at an event in the States. This was a couple of years ago, and the head of Group 1, which is a big group down there, was talking about exactly this. And they were talking about, the vision is so simple. We're going to have a data lake where every customer will have one record.
Yeah.
And every system will read and write to that one record.
I love that.
And sounds so nice. She said the number, and I forget the number, but it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars they had spent so far. They still weren't even close. And they said one of the other real challenges is there are vendors we absolutely need to work with because they have us, whatever it is they provide, we need that thing.
Yeah.
And they may have the ability to read from our lake, but they can't write back to it. But if we're going to keep moving towards that grail, we shouldn't be working with them, but we have no option.
Yeah.
And so it was a bit of hey, we've spent this massive pile of money already, and we have a lot more spending to do.
Yeah.
And they would be a lot farther along than most of the dealer groups in North America.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is having read-write capabilities or working with software companies, and we've seen this, globally. Manufacturers need to just focus on manufacturing and then partner with software. You don't need to build, because building software is expensive, maintaining software is and then configuring it is really expensive. So having the ability to use the right systems to do the right job, I think hopefully your audit will, and that research will throw out some of the duplication of systems that are doing things that the original system should already do. So partly, we have to make sure that any system we put in, people understand what it can do, and we train people properly, so you're not then having to do a workaround for something your system already does. Yeah. And we still see that. People go, oh, I've printed off the thing. You go, no, it's got DocuSign inbuilt. But they don't realise they're just used to having a piece of paper. I want the paper, and I will take it to the customer, and they will sign the paper, and then I will scan the paper in and put it back in the system. You're like, no, just do it online. You can do all of these things. But I think that takes discovery and someone that knows something, and often retailers just don't want to ask because they just think they don't want to look stupid. So I think that's one of the areas that will be
But it's fascinating to see. I mean, there are so many things that have to move along a path to make it work. The consumer has to be happily meeting that DocuSign document. The training has to cause the dealership staff to put it there in the first place. And this is where one of the things I found fascinating. When we were just over in China about a month ago. Two of the companies that really stood out for me were Huawei and Xiaomi, and both of them started as consumer electronics companies, not car companies. And the integration they have, I mean, certainly the retail experience, but then the integration between the car, the consumer's phone, you can buy everything from your dishwasher to your hair dryer to your phone to your TV but what's amazing is it's all one integrated ecosystem. To me, in a way, it speaks to the challenge of the technology integration, where in a lot of ways it was easier for a consumer tech company to figure out how to build cars than it is for car companies to become great at the consumer tech.
And it is about software. The thing is now is that software-defined vehicles, SDVs, are the thing. So actually, when you think, remember Harvey was giving a keynote a while ago now, and she's our CRO, she was saying, when you think about phones, it used to be hardware, now it's software. You have all of your applications on that phone. The thing just hosts all of your life, and it's all software in your phone or in your pocket. So I think what will be interesting, Neil, is as those vehicles start to track every element of the vehicle's behavior, you can start to really drive intuitive servicing and reduction of accidents. And so there's some real positive outputs, but all of that relies on me approving you to use my data when I want you to use my data. So so it's going to be interesting. So
and it's challenging. I mean, from a dealer standpoint, you say, look, I recognize, and we see this in our own research. So the research we're doing as far as this road ahead and looking at the next 10 years is very clear that the two areas where dealers are going to be spending the most money is people and technology. But to sort of say, okay, I know I have to spend money on tech. I want to make sure I spend it the right way. But the news changes every day as quickly as the tariff news changes, the tech news changes. Like I think it was yesterday that Meta announced they've just launched, they're launching a new product in Facebook that all you will have to do to advertise your products is give them a product image. That's it. And you give them a product image and you sort of say, hey, here's the profile of our customer, et cetera. And their
algorithms
will now create all of the ad creative, build the entire media plan. Everything is automated. And let's imagine that, you and I were going to be fed the exact same ad for, let's hope it's a really good bottle of wine. We're going to be fed the exact same ad. The background in the ad you get will be different than the one I get because everything is being built off the knowledge of that customer. So
scary,
you think all of a sudden now, like, we don't need an ad agency. You don't need a creative agency. You don't need writers. You don't need a media. I mean, if it can deliver on the promise, so then literally every human being will get an individualized piece of ad creative. So you think from a car dealer standpoint, you say, okay, well, look, we've fed all the OEM images into your system, and all I'm going to need to do is say, I want to spend this much money supporting Corolla this month, and I've got this stock, get rid of it, or I've got that stock, market it to the right demographic, to the right demographic, with the right creative and the right imagery and the right.
Did you see, I don't know whether you've seen it, we posted it on LinkedIn, but we interviewed Mohammed Lone from Google UK. And he was saying they've used I think it's VO3, or I forget the name of the tech, but they created an ad for a Porsche in AI completely, whole storyboard, including the behind the scenes of when they interviewed the people. The entire thing was AI generated. The entire thing. Yeah. And my son is just graduating in film. I'm like, oh, bugger. It's like, oh no. So Oh, that's a shame, isn't it? It sucks to be you. So, AI has just ruined your career.
Yeah, don't worry, you can always live with mum.
Exactly. Well, no, I know, exactly, forever. So, yeah, but it does work. You're right, though. It's like now, there was an AI ad I saw on Facebook, which is don't trust this, it's AI. Like, what can you trust that's real and what can you not trust? So there are great things that will be advancing. And I wonder whether or not, Neil, actually, we still see people going into the dealership because looking in someone's face, you build trust because you know that's a real person. I build trust, I can talk to you. So there does seem to be, omnichannel is about online in store. It's not all online. I think that's the important thing. So it's connecting up digital tools with physical experiences and how you experience the vehicle when you get in it. Does your life fit in it? How does it, does it fit you're very, very tall. You can't go, maybe you need a bigger car than I do.
There are many cars that are not made for me.
Yeah,
there are many airplane seats.
I'm not getting in that car. Nope,
Yeah.
It's a no from me. Take a hard pass. So I do think you've got to physically experience something to know whether it's right for you. So I think
and interestingly, I was looking at some research, I think this was a few weeks ago, that showed that the percent across different generational, Gen Zs and et cetera, the importance of in-store as part of the vehicle retail experience, it's actually going up relative to what it was a few years ago with the youngest buyers. So this is not a case of, the older folks still want to go into the store and have that physical in-store experience and the young ones don't. Actually, if anything, what's happening is, to your point, I think the more we realize a lot of what we're being shown is synthesized and created and all the rest. We still want to be able to say, okay, great, that's informed me and I've learned, but now I need to go in and I want to have a real interaction with a human being in a physical store to acquire a product that I know I have to have an ongoing service relationship with and a repurchase relationship and all the rest.
Fully online, weirdly, didn't work. Obviously, Kazoo is the UK version of that. Clutch is the Canadian version of that, where they're kind of doing the whole used car online piece. And actually, the returns that they had in the UK business were phenomenal. So they had vehicles returned because they weren't in the condition they expected, or so there was a lot of deals that were unwound. So I do think in some cases that if it is a used car over a certain age, you really need to look at it to make sure you're happy with the condition, because you can't smell it online. If someone smoked in that vehicle or had a million dogs, you know what I mean? You kind of get and you go, ew, no, you want to get out. So there are certain things that you will need to do in person to validate that experience. So
it's like online dating. It turns out some people lie about their age and put up old photos.
We had that whole conversation. You walk in, you go, nope.
That's not the person I'm expecting. No. Might have been 10 years ago, but...
I know, that's so funny. Like, were you that big on your photo? No, you were not. I know. Oh my God. But it's true. I went to look for a car for my son the other day, and his old car is a complete shed. It's, on its last legs. And we looked at this one on Facebook Marketplace. It looked brilliant, little VW up. Really nice pictures. We turned up massive crack on the windscreen, had obviously been parked under a tree for a few months. It was really bad and it was damaged and you couldn't see that. And we then vehicle searched it and it was a write-off. So we were like, in fact, I got a friend of mine in the trade to do a quick vehicle search to say it had been a cat end. So it was drivable, but it was a category and write-off. And then I was messaging the guy going, there's a crack on the windscreen. And, something must have fallen on it. I went, something fell on it before you bought it, mate. It drove into something, I think was the real thing. But you have to really see it. If that thing had been delivered and you'd paid for it online, you'd have been sending it back. So you've got to be a bit careful. So great piece of research. Looking forward to that. And hopefully we'll get you along to our event in September. We're coming back with the team in Montreal.
That'd be fun.
To launch all of our fancy new tech. So we have actually got a big launch planned this year where we've got a lot of our connected tech is going to be brought to Canada first, which is great. So we've kind of leapfrogged some of the European markets to bring it here. And it feels like the country is ready. They're ready to kind of go now. It felt like they were a bit unsure of it, but it probably feels now like there's a real appetite for disruption within the industry anyway. It feels like they want to kind of advance and do things better, which is great. So, that's all good. So what next? So big piece of research, and then you've got a few events planned this year?
We'll get, it'll be a bit quieter over the summer, but then the fall will kick in again, and there'll be lots of different events. One of the things that is still really, since post-pandemic, when when events started back up again, we're continuing to see, particularly for the dealer events, really, really strong turnout from coast to coast.
Yeah.
So we had the KDEX event in Halifax in May. It was by a large margin, the biggest audience we'd ever had.
Yeah.
Just had a great event in Saskatchewan. We're going to be back out west in Lake Louise for the Western Dealer Summit. That was a really big event last year. I think it's going to be even bigger this year, so that's great. One of the things that we're doing is we do the visitor experience research for the Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver auto shows in Canada, but we're also doing it for the New York Auto Show and the LA Auto Show.
Nice.
And so we'll have the LA Auto Show coming up in the fall too, so we'll be down there for that. And that's actually really interesting because it gives us a really sort of North American view of the role auto shows continue to play in the consumer purchase funnel and the brand consideration funnel and all that.
Your events are so well attended. Whenever I've seen any of the Dealer Association events here, so well attended. And we struggle, I think, in certain markets to get people to turn up to these things. What are they turning up? What are they kind of go to see main? Is it networking? Is it learning? What are they kind of? What do you find really pulls the numbers in?
I think it's both. I think the networking piece is important, for sure. But I definitely think that, and we see it in the dreaded surveys that you get afterwards. I mean, people do really care that the content is right. And around things like certainly consumer behavior, technology, AI, new brands, and the economics and the politics of it all. Like it feels, like I think for all of us in the industry, it feels like these really big building blocks are being moved.
Yeah.
And I think to be able to feel that you're doing everything you can to be informed is really important.
I think that's the thing, is that knowing the political landscape is so flexible at the moment, or the tariff situation is quite flexible. You've got to be really on your toes, or actually you just stay really calm. You carry on flying your own plane or steering your own sled. It's fine. I think you've got to I think actually there does seem to be a real kind of resolute attitude here to, we'll be okay. I think we're going to be all right. We'll get through it. And when this next term ends, we can get back to normal maybe.
or not, or it'll be different. But I think, and certainly from a retail standpoint, Canada's population is higher than it's ever been. We've had a lot of population growth. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we're a mature car market. A certain number of people are going to need a certain number of cars, and maybe a bit more new or a bit more used. And I think there's a real sense that if we stay, from a retail standpoint, if we're doing a really good job for our customers and we stay focused on doing the best job we can for our customers, that's going to take care of most of what we need to take care of.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Listen, that was brilliant, and hopefully then we'll get you back in September. We can have a little update then.
That'd be fun.
And then we're going to be planning again. We always look forward to, highlight of the year for us is always February Toronto Auto Show. Always come to that. And
you'll be back at the summit. We're
back at the summit. Always are. That's on our calendar, so for sure. But no, great. So Niel, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's great.
So thanks again to Niel Hiscox joining us live on the Drivetime podcast on the road from Toronto recently. We hope you enjoyed that episode, and you can join us for more shorts from various events. Don't forget to tune into our YouTube channel. You can like and follow and subscribe for more. Thank you.